Control C. Hello, hi, my name's Dell. Anyways, we're doing whatever the fuck I want to do, and yeah, this is kind of what we're doing at the moment. Anyways, this is going to be a reaction to, well, TaleFoundry, a very fucking. They're a very good channel. They have stuff on like Nova and Nebula. That's what it's called, Nebula. Anyways, I'm just gonna have the links in the description so you can go and support them. That would be very helpful if you did. As for myself, we're gonna be just chilling and watching a video. This one is called. Oh, shit. Sorry, just drank. Okay, I'm probably gonna still be burping throughout this. I don't give a fuck. If you want this shit without my audio input, go watch the original video. Thank you. This is why there's no new mythology. Anyways, let's begin.
The moon goddess Artemis. In ancient Greece, the moon goddess Artemis knocks an arrow and signals to her band of sworn maiden hunters as her twin brother Apollo rides his sun chariot across the sky. In Scandinavia, the one-eyed Norse god Odin stalks the world of Midgard, seeking the famed mead of poetry, which will transform the drinker into one of the most knowledgeable among all skalds and scholars. In ancient Egypt, the goddess Isis collects all the pieces of her murdered husband Osiris's body and reassembles him so that she can conceive
I wonder what
a
they're building
son,
to, because this is
Horus.
like just a bunch of.
Do you ever wonder what happened to stories like these? Why this kind of tale was only told by the ancients? Why there's no new mythology? Well, the answer to that is, of course, that there is. Pick up any novel from the fantasy section of your local bookstore and you'll likely find some kind of mythology that forms the basis of its fictional world. In fact, thanks to the internet, there are probably more mythologies now than there ever have been.
Technically speaking, if no one keeps a record that says that SCP isn't real and our civilization gets wiped out, but SCP files get like they remain, there is a high chance that people would actually believe in the future that SCP is real. And I wouldn't be surprised.
At any point in human history. What a wonderful time we live in. But that's not actually what you meant, is it?
No.
You're not here wondering about fictional mythologies from fictional worlds, are you? You probably want to know about the real deal.
It's also because while we do sometimes, occasionally, in recent history, have people create new religions, Jehovah, Mormons, there's not a lot of just new religions starting up. Like, we got little mini cults, but none like major religions that people will then go, oh, these are mythologies. They'll just go, new religion with a little bit of a creation myth.
Myths like the ones I mentioned just a moment ago. What happened to them? Will we ever see people telling genuine stories like that again? You almost have to wonder, is mythology dead?
God, I love this introduction. It's so beautiful. Is it weird I want like an hour-long loop of just this?
One of the best things in life is learning, which is probably why you're here to begin with.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not everyone learns the same. Public school is not a one-size-fits-all option, and I don't really think it ever can be. As a result, a lot of us creative types end up missing out on a lot of precious education. Fortunately, there is a shockingly easy, fun, and highly personalized way to get an education right from home. Learn all of your fundamentals, maths, sciences, computer programming, and more with our sponsor, Brilliant. Visit brilliant.org/TaleFoundry to get 30 days for free and 20% off a year subscription. Seriously, this is the most fun you'll probably ever have learning this stuff. Try it out for free and be as brilliant as I know that you can be.
Okay then. By the way, I'm going to have that link in the description. Just get down there and watch it. Well, not even watch it. Just click the link, go and support them.
Problem with that question is that a lot of mythology is actually just religion. People weren't just using the sun chariot of Apollo as a metaphor for the rising and the setting of the sun. They actually believed that that was what was happening. And, as tends to be the case with most religion, expressing your skepticism of these beliefs was not exactly appreciated. Just ask
Now you get to
Socrates.
die.
You may have noticed, though, that we don't call modern religious stories myths. That would feel pretty rude, wouldn't it? That's
Oh, that also could be another way of saying thinking of it. Because I was thinking of we're just not creating more religions, but it's also that we don't have a bunch of religions that people think are false. Most of the religions that are still around at the moment, people think of as going, "Hey, these are held beliefs."
because the term myth has another meaning. Something that isn't
Yep.
true, or at the very least whose veracity is dubious. The show Mythbusters, videos promising to debunk the top 10 weight loss myths, that sort of thing. Not the implication you usually want to make about somebody else's deeply held beliefs. So, we
Eh,
tend to reserve the term myth for the dead religions, the gods who don't have anyone left to feel offended for them. But
that's so fucked. On a level of like, imagine if you were actually a god who depends on people's fucking worship, and all that remains is the calcified husk of what your myths are. And you're just hoping that some people at least go in to start praying to you again to bring you back to life. I kind of want a story about that now. Yo, somebody who's watching this, go into the description, like start writing a damn story purely about a god who's been left, died effectively. But the only thing it reminds is the fucking ruins of his temples and everything else. And people are like, it's a dead god. Who cares? And they just have one little follower praying, and it happens to bring them back just enough. So now they got to try to bring back a whole cult. That'd be interesting. Anyway, let's keep going.
when you ask why there's no new mythologies, you probably aren't asking about religions either, are you? Because there are new religions popping up every single day. A
Yep,
lot of those are what we would call cults, and if you're looking for information on how to start one,
Scientology.
TaleFoundry is probably not the YouTube channel you're looking for. So, if not
Excuse me, what the fuck was that? Why did we see the little purple person pop up all of a sudden? Hold up.
TaleFoundry is probably
Who this? Who this? Okay? Somebody explain to me. They're that's an interesting looking motherfucker too. Do they have another channel? Additional music? No, 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 no. I'm about to say, is there actually a video that's like, this is like one of those moments where they're like, oh, we're not the person to go to, and then all of a sudden an iCard pops up, and it's like, well, here's one example of where you can go.
not the YouTube channel you're looking for. So, if not gods from fictional worlds and not religions, then what exactly are we even talking about here? Let's get academic for a sec. The term myth itself comes from the
Okay.
ancient Greek word mythos, and it referred to any thought, idea, or story delivered by way of spoken word. But of course, language changes, and the word itself has obviously evolved beyond that. Very few people would argue that a myth stops being a myth when it's written down, and even fewer would probably argue that anything spoken aloud
Mm-hmm.
is, by definition, a myth. Even experts tend to
Yeah.
have a hard time defining what a myth is. Finnish folklorist Lauri Honko refers to it as a story of the gods, a religious account of the beginning of the world, the creation, fundamental events, the exemplary deeds of the gods as a result of which the world, nature,
Which is
and
now
culture were
makes me think
created.
of the religious
Spanish
stuff
myth
again.
criticism professor Jose Manuel Losada calls it a functional, symbolic, and thematic narrative of one or several.
It's also another way of just saying one of the situations. It's one of those things where people can just go, "It's what I want it to be because it is." It's like, what? This doesn't make sense. It's myth. Who the fuck said it had to make sense?
Extraordinary events with a transcendent, sacred, and supernatural referent that lacks, in principle, historical testimony, and that refers to an individual or collective, but always absolute, cosmogony or eschatology. Wikipedia very
Mm-hmm.
simply defines it as a folklore genre consisting of narratives that play a fundamental role in a society.
Huh.
These are all different definitions, but they have some important elements in common. A myth seems to be a story that is very important to a certain culture, that explains
Yes.
why the world is the way it is, and has some supernatural religious aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Not a
Mm-hmm.
perfect definition, but good enough to start working toward an answer to the question we really want. Is myth, in fact, dead? And if so, what killed it? I think the easiest
Modernization.
go-to answer here is, surprise, surprise, science.
Yep.
Centuries after the Enlightenment, people no longer need to explain away the sun as the wheel of Apollo's chariot. We know what makes the sun rise in the east and set in the west.
I'm now asking a really bad question. Um, Never mind. That's one of those things where people would be like, I want to say, like, imagine, could someone just walk up and be like, science is a myth? But that doesn't make sense because everything about science is that it's actually able to be proven and fall. Like, it doesn't make sense to say that. Someone could definitely just walk up and say science is a myth, but it doesn't make sense to do
There
so.
are still a handful of people who worship Apollo, but I doubt even most of them believe in this story literally, the way that the ancients did. After all, people have access to telescopes now. You can just go check. But science is only one of the reasons for
By the way, please don't actually point a fucking telescope at the sun. That's a bad decision. Unless you have like the lens things that let you do so, don't do it.
its decline. It also just sort of comes down to how people tell stories now. It's easy to take it for granted, but the concept of fiction itself hasn't been around forever. Most stories in antiquity were told with at least a veneer of plausibility. The teller would claim to believe it, and so would the audience. There was no specific term for stories that the teller admitted were untrue, that the audience accepted were untrue, and which were told for entertainment purposes anyway. To them, that would have just been a complicated way of lying. You can see this in the way that many ancient legends mix mythology and history. The Trojan War could very possibly have happened, but was Achilles really there? And was he actually invincible because he was dipped in the river Styx as a baby?
Or was he
Probably
just a
not.
madman who was named after the fucking person who was just putting bodies on the board? Do I actually believe it's true? Fuck no. Do I want it to be true? Yeah, kinda.
Common for the exploits of real heroes.
Actually, now that I think about it, if your religion dies and you're okay, so I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of how time works, right? Say that your beliefs make God real. If the people stop believing, what's left? And instead, if say that like the Apollo reference, since we keep going back to Apollo, right? Say that people stop believing in Apollo. Well, the sun doesn't disappear. It doesn't become just a cold, wasteless nightmare land here. The sun is what's left behind, and he's dead instead, right? But I'm also thinking, how would this affect time? Because if your myths dictate you doing something in the past, could it change the past and rewrite over if people stop believing in you? Which would be a very interesting idea. Hmm. I now want a story where people are like, the gods are dying. Why? And they try to look into the past or look around the world only to realize in the future people have stopped believing and it's rewriting their history as they're living it. That would be a fucking crazy story.
Heroes to become attributed to gods, and, on the other hand, in cultures like Ireland, traditional gods are downgraded to the status of fairies and metaphors, sometimes even just legendary rulers.
We, if I'm correct, isn't that also because Christianity basically beat the dog shit out of everyone who just said, "I have a god"? No, you do not, motherfucker. It's just a fairy. It's just a fairy. It's just a fairy. It's like I can let that slide.
In the case of Ireland, a lot of this to avoid accusations of idolatry after much of the population was converted to Christianity. Catholicism's Saint Bridget, for instance, shares a suspicious number of similarities to the ancient Irish fire goddess of the same name. So there's science and there's fiction. There's also one more very important concept blocking
I've never heard of Saint Bridget before. May I have to check into that later.
the development of new mythologies: canonicity. Before literacy became more commonplace, most tales were spread
Yep.
orally. Mythos, in its original form,
Oh yeah, because mythos usually was kind of like we don't know exactly what happened, but we got a general idea because this is what happens here. But with the internet, everybody knows everything instantly.
and that had a couple of different effects. The first is that no one knows who came up with these stories originally because it wasn't written down anywhere. It's basically just rumors, gossip, the longest game of telephone ever. And the second major effect is that nobody knows how much these stories have changed over time, as they've been passed from person to person with no way to compare who told what version of the story when, or how they changed.
I do kind of like this though, because it means that whatever myth we have now was purely only surviving because of popularity and who wrote down what they did when they did. Because that's the only way I can understand it. It's purely just like popularity at that point, or a gamble.
Those two factors make something very important possible. These stories do not belong to anyone because they cannot belong to anyone. The closest thing you can really say is that they belong to a culture, and even that is pretty dubious, as stories are known to be passed back and forth across borders and peoples all the time. These days, we basically have paper trails for everything we make. We even have copyright laws to protect the intellectual property of creators. No one can
Fuck.
profit off a story you've made.
Imagine someone tries to copyright the Greek gods. Actually, you know what? Knowing how capitalist and just like everybody is, it's like, I want money. What are you gonna do to make money? I copyrighted the Greek gods. The fuck?
Unless you give them written permission. And while those rules are very useful in protecting authors and artists, and especially the Walt Disney Corporation, they also have
The Walt Disney Corporation is a great fucking standout there. Let's just hear that again.
in protecting authors and artists, and especially the Walt Disney Corporation, they also have the downside of making stories less accessible, and therefore hampering collaborative storytelling. When Dante Alighieri wrote the Divine Comedy, he didn't have to request permission from someone who originally came up with the Christian concept of hell, because that story belonged not to a single author, but to all of Christendom. Now
Yeah.
you yourself are welcome to create
Copywriting heaven would be fucking crazy. Oh, you thought I was gonna say copyright hell? No, why would you want to have copyright on hell? I think everyone gets to share that equally. But copyright heaven would be fucking incredible.
spin-off of the Divine Comedy, no permission needed, because that book is in the public domain. But unlike the concept of hell, this is a novel, and its lineage is written down. Everyone will know it's based on this one specific work, the Divine Comedy, and if they feel like doing research, they'll be able to find their own copy of the original and look up exactly how many liberties you've taken with the source material. So, we have science challenging the role of myths as ideological narratives used to understand the world. We have fiction eliminating the need for a basis of assumed truth in all the stories that we tell. And we have canonicity, which allows us to identify who created the work and how it's changed. Given all of this, it's sort of easy to say that it was progress that killed myths, that it's a form of story humans simply don't feel the need to tell anymore for a variety of reasons. And because of that, barring some earth-shattering event that sets the species back a couple thousand years, myth will probably have to stay dead. So, I guess it's time.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's just like World War III on the horizon. Here we go. Everybody, I need y'all to start printing out the SCP files. And then keep them in like bunkers, okay? And just hopefully some of them survive so that the next generation of whatever the fuck comes out of the toxic ooze in the ground just goes, oh shit, there's SCPs before the Great Rapture.
Time to say goodbye to one of the oldest and most beloved forms of storytelling. Myth has died, and all we can do is mourn its loss. Okay, I hope you weren't taking that too seriously. You weren't really expecting me to let go of one of my favorite types of story that easily, were you?
Yes, I totally forgot we had this much runtime in the video. For reference, for everyone who's watching, we are only halfway through this bitch. I'm dumb.
Because, honestly, I really don't think I need to. Yes, myths have changed. That's true. The stories of the gods and heroes from antiquity may no longer serve as explanations for natural phenomena, but their lasting impact on culture remains undeniable. Every time you refer to a Pandora's box, an Achilles heel, or a Herculean effort, you're invoking a cultural legacy thousands of years old. Myths will never completely go away because they become part of the collective consciousness, serving as a wellspring of inspiration for creatives the world over.
I
Ancient
still remember
Japanese
that damn
gods and
movie.
spirits show up in such diverse modern anime as Spirited Away, Death Note, and Yokai Watch. Norse gods like Thor and Loki have become some of the most famous characters in the world with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How many times have we seen Cupid show up as the special guest in the Valentine's Day episode of cartoon shows? And
Cupid,
who can
oh my
forget
god.
that seminal 2011 classic, Nickelodeon's House of Anubis?
What?
But the impact of ancient mythology is
I've
hardly
never heard of that
limited to
one.
simply reimagining mythical figures as characters. The plot beats of ancient stories can be tweaked and given a new coat of paint to replay ageless dramas with a fresh cast of characters. The way Frankenstein is based on the myth of Prometheus, and Moulin Rouge is based on the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Or the personalities of archetypal figures can be used as the basis for entirely new characters. Think of any fictional pantheons that have a love goddess and a trickster god. Probably most famously, comic book heroes are often referred to as modern mythology, and the similarities are hard to ignore. Beings with godlike powers, sometimes, as with Thor and Loki, actual mythological deities, each with their own theme and emblem, who fight to protect or destroy the world, whose canon is forever shifting. Sounds like mythology to me. But they're missing a few things. Firstly, we know that their creators and their lineage are recorded. Secondly, they aren't free for anyone to use. And thirdly, nobody actually believes in them. They're much less modern mythology.
It would be really bad if we started teaching kids comic books and just not telling them they're fake. That would be a bad idea, but it would be funny.
And more, the metaphorical gods of the American zeitgeist, if anything. But that's just how the legacy of myth has lived on. Where are all the new myths? The kind with no author, no traceable lineage? Okay, you humans aren't really dreaming up new gods so much anymore, but you're still participating in that old oral tradition. You come up with other tales, cryptids that lurk in the woods and caves in the bottom of Loch Ness, urban legends that totally happened to your roommate's cousin's friend, all passed through word of mouth over the course of decades with no known originator or verification. Some of them, like tales of friendly alien encounters, are just intriguing, but the vast majority are also supposed to be frightening. Because, just like myths, a lot of scary stories exist to explain the world around you. Why you should be scared of dark places and strangers, why nobody enters that abandoned building, where that weird stain on the school carpet came from. And unlike myths, scary stories are thriving. Creepypastas have been all over the internet practically since it existed, most passed from person to person with no...
You know what? We're not going to do that. I was going to just say for a moment, I was like, oh, one day we can watch, like, Pinkamena for next Halloween, or Little Miss Pinkamena, or Little Miss Rarity. Those would be very fun to watch for next Halloween, but probably not, due to the fact that Twitch or whoever the fuck TOS, I don't want to deal with.
Central canon, many with no clear source. It started with email chain letters forwarded by superstitious uncles and grandmothers, and eventually gave way to creatures like Slenderman, who've inspired actual violent crimes by believers. And while we know where Slenderman came from, we still don't know where the original photo of the backrooms was taken, or who the person in the original photo of Jeff the Killer really was. Intriguingly, the most similar thing we might have to our own mythology now might be conspiracy theories.
Oh my god, they're so right.
But the ones that are really out there. After all, what's a cabal of all-powerful shape-shifting lizard people if not a pantheon of malevolent gods? Conspiracy theories like these show not just a similarity to ancient mythology in terms of its followers sincerely believing in it, but also in the way that sincere belief can be twisted to do harm. Still, there are some important differences here.
These are actual
conspiracy
nightmare
theorists
creatures.
don't worship the gods they believe in, but seek to destroy them instead. And they aren't fundamental to an entire culture, just a small subculture. And
Hmm.
I know none of this is exactly what we described when we were defining myth, but that elder type of mythology is still out there too. For instance, during World War II, certain Melanesian tribes with little exposure to the outside world interpreted the cargo drops from Allied planes as signs of
Hmm.
favor from the spirits. These cargo cults, as they became known, began worshipping
I
figures such
remember
as a mythical
actually reading
American
about the
soldier
Civil
called
War.
John Frum, as well as Prince Philip of the United Kingdom. These religions still exist to this day, with entire generations of children presumably raised in the faith. And, while I don't know for sure whether they've developed complex mythology around these beliefs, I think it's a pretty safe guess. Mythology just seems to be a part of being human.
So if we don't
So,
understand something,
myth
we'll
in the
make up a
classic
reason.
sense might basically be dead, but that doesn't mean you aren't still engaging in a version of it. Every time you invoke one of the old mythological figures, every time you form the next link in the chain of a rumor, every time you speculate baselessly about the true nature of things, you're participating in one of the oldest storytelling traditions of all, myth. And someday,
This
perhaps,
is a
in the
nice way of
far
making me
distant
feel
future,
better.
your ancestors will look back on the strange stories you told and believed and allowed to inform your worldview with the same
For fuck's sake, isn't H.P. Lovecraft shit like a whole thing that spawned into so many others? That also works in there. Yeah, no, we are definitely gonna create our own mess if we fucking nuke each other. Hopefully we don't, but knowing humanity, I can't put it past us.
sense of awe that you feel for the gods of old. One of the most interesting truths about all fiction, though, no matter how fantastical, it has its roots in reality. All those old ideological narratives, the stories about how the sun travels across the sky because it's the wheel of Apollo's chariot, or how the earth and the sky are separate from each other because a giant pushed them apart,
What?
all early human attempts to
I've
rationalize a
never heard of that
reality that
one.
they were observing. But those early humans were comparatively limited in how much of the world they even could observe. These days, you can observe a whole lot more of it if you have the tools. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many new stories to tell, so much speculating left to do, provided you can see the parts of your world that aren't so easily observed. Normally, that means years of study and schooling, but it doesn't have to. Our
Mm-hmm.
sponsor, Brilliant.org, can make all of that easier and more fun than it's ever been before. Brilliant really has been helping me broaden my horizons. I can always go to the site, click into a class, pick up where I
I'm
left
gonna tell
off,
y'all
and
to
take
go
in
down into the description and support the original, but I'm also not gonna watch this all again because we literally went through the entire brilliant part last year. Okay, so no point in me doing it twice. Just gonna get off to the end.
days for free and 20% off a
Oh yeah, my link will be in the description as well. If you want to support me, check it out. You should support the original. And you can like, comment, subscribe, like it if you actually think I'm did something good. Comment if you have something to say, and subscribe because you think that you want to come back around and support, or you think that I'm worthy of your subscription. Thank you. Anyways, let's begin. Well, not begin. Let's